Hi, my name's Steve Maher. I'm the ergonomics guy, and today's case study is about alternative keyboards. And I'd like to show you how we looked at different types of equipment to solve this woman's problem. And she was complaining about right wrist and shoulder pain, especially with reaching out for the mouse. So I'd like to show you kind of the thought process and how we came up with a solution. So if you look at this first picture, what you're going to see is she's actually in a pretty good position, right? She's in a nice adjustable chair. She's in a pretty neutral position. Her low back is supported. Her shoulders are pretty relaxed, maybe a little bit tense because I'm looking at her. But the issue is further down, right? Her shoulders relaxed here at her side. Her elbow is a little less than 90 degrees, which is fine. That tends to take pressure off of your bicep and your elbow. The problem is at the wrist. So she's reaching in to get to the home row like this, and then to keep her fingers square on the keys, she has to hold her wrist out in this position, maybe not quite that far. But that's called ulnar deviation. And what that does is it puts a lot of stress on all these muscles on the outside of your forearm. And then as you bend your wrist, that puts more stress on the small muscles in your hand and pinky. But it can also affect what's happening over here on your thumb. So a lot of times you'll see somebody with a de Quervain's type of tenosynovitis or an irritation of the thumb tendons, and it's because they're holding their wrist in a really awkward position. And you can actually feel this if you just put your fingers straight and then twist your wrist out, so bend your wrist out towards your pinky as far as it will go, and you can feel the muscles tighten up on the outside of your forearm and kind of stretch across your thumb there a little bit. So that's part of what she was feeling when she was keying. The other part is when she's reaching out for the mouse on the side. So she would actually elevate her shoulders, so you can see how her shoulder's coming up here and how these muscles are tensed. And then she's externally rotating, so she's bringing her arm out to the side like this. And so she's going from way out here, then she's coming way in here. And so she has this pretty big arc of movement right there, going from the keys on that side to the mouse on that side. And that in and out movement will tend to cause shoulder pain. It can irritate the rotator cuff and the small muscle. The supraspinatus actually runs right through here, and that can get irritated with repetitive external and internal rotation. So what we did is we looked at a different style of keyboard, and to take care of the ulnar deviation, what I did is we looked at a split key keyboard. Okay, and what that is, usually you'll think of a Microsoft Natural, maybe a Microsoft Sculpt, the Wave keyboard by Fellows, different companies make them. And what they do is they separate these keys here. So the keypad is actually at an angle like this and like this, so that it's a little bit wider. So when you're reaching in for the keys, you're not going into that ulnar deviation. And you can see that her shoulder is a little more relaxed right here. These muscles aren't nearly as tensed. Okay, she's reaching down, and her wrist is much straighter as she's reaching in for the keyboard. So that helps to decrease that ulnar deviation, and that helps to take pressure off of the wrist in general. And she's not making that movement so much. That feels better. And then what we did is this keyboard actually has a little touchpad, just like you would have on your laptop, right there. And what that does is it allows her to mouse from the center of the keyboard. And there's different ways to do this. There's a roller bar mouse, and I think there's one called the Roller Edge. Or I've done different videos on these products. But the idea is, rather than have your mouse out here, where you have to reach out here every time and then reach in like this, right, with that big arc of movement, you can mouse from the center of the keyboard right here. Okay, so this seemed like a pretty good fix. Her wrists are in a much more neutral position when she's typing. She's not reaching way out here to mouse, and she's mousing from the center of the keyboard. The problem is that you can see it's still putting her wrist in a pretty awkward position there. So she didn't really like it. So her shoulder was feeling better, but her wrist really wasn't feeling any better. So the next thing that we did is we got a Kinesis keyboard. And what this is, it's a split key keyboard where the two halves actually completely come apart. And you can separate them from 0 to up to 20 inches. There's a cord that connects the two halves right there. So what that allows you to do is spread out the halves of the keyboard so you don't have to reach in at all. And so now you can see her shoulder is relaxed. down her side here. She's reaching down and her wrist is absolutely straight. So she's typing and she's not moving her wrist in and out. So she's not going into that ulnar deviation when she's typing. I made a video on the Kinesis keyboard too, you can check out, and maybe I can try and put the link in there. But it also comes with an accessory pack, so you can change the angle of these two pads so they don't have to sit flat on the desk or keyboard surface. You can actually angle them a little bit to supinate your wrist just a little bit to keep it in a slightly more neutral position, kind of like she was doing with the keyboard above. But the real reason I wanted this was to keep her wrist nice and straight and allow her to separate things out. Then what we did is she's simulating it here because it hadn't come in yet, but the idea was to get an external touchpad right there that she could put between the two halves of the keyboard. So she separated the keyboard, and now when she's reaching in for the mouse, her wrist is pretty much straight. So she's no longer having to deviate her wrist one way or the other to use the touchpad because it's right there in the center, and she no longer has to reach way out here. And you can see that her shoulder is much more relaxed, her wrist is in a much more neutral position. And this took care of her symptoms. So this was the answer for her. And so sometimes it takes several tries. You think one thing's going to work, and it just doesn't work for that client or that patient, and so you try something else. So it's always a good idea to know what your equipment options are and then try them out to see which one is going to work with which client, because there's no standard. Everybody's a little bit different, and that is the key of ergonomics, is figuring out what is going to work with this client. So if you're having issues in your workstation and need help finding the right equipment or adjusting the equipment you already have to be as comfortable and functional as possible, please contact us and we can do a video consult like that using your pictures, or we can do a live one-on-one Skype call where we can actually walk through the changes with you. So please contact us, and do me a favor, if you thought this was helpful, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and share it with your friends because I'm sure they could use some help too. Thank you very much.